Fox News accompanied the Attorney General to South America on an official trip for which they were rewarded with an interview on camera. We'll play this, talk about it after we see it.
I've been trying to get answers to questions, and I found that a lot of the answers have been inadequate. And I've also found that some of the explanations I've gotten don't hang together. So in a sense, I have more questions today than I did when I first started. I think people have to find out what the government was doing during that period. If we're worried about foreign influence, for the very same reason, we should be worried about whether government officials abuse their power and put their thumb on the scale. And so I'm not saying that happened, but I'm saying that we have to look at that.
That was important right there. He's tying together, in terms of importance, potential foreign influence on our election and how it was reacted to here by the federal government. Are they the same?
Well, what he's really doing is sort of buying into the president's calls, which even preceded him, and we saw on Twitter, for basically his Department of Justice to investigate, frankly, his political rivals, his enemies, the investigators who were investigating him. And that is sort of a theory of the case that the president and some of his allies have long made. People say that sort of politicizing the Department of Justice and the government. And so it is very striking to see that that is something that Barr is accepting and willing to use the power of his department to move ahead on.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.